teaching ratios and praise versus criticism. This is a pretty interesting section. United World Wrestling back in 2014. United World Wrestling in 2014 started educating the educators that are going to teach United World Wrestling curriculum. We had a group out of Europe come in. It was a rugby-based group, and they came and they were teaching us not so much the what to coach, right? On your videos, I don't care what you coach. I don't care if it's judo, I don't care if it's Greco, it doesn't matter. I've done a judo practice for a wrestling coach. I want to know how you coach, how you teach, your methodology, your interactions, your communication. That's all I'm really checking. If there's a few things I'm like, well, that might be a safety issue, I'll stop a safety issue and I'll say you absolutely can't do that, and here's a better way to replace it, or think of a better way. But only if it's a safety issue. So most of what you're going to see from me are the things that you're doing, not the things that you're teaching, right? I don't care if it's a double, single, high crotch, gut wrench, any of that. It's how. So these folks came in and they said 1-to-4 teaching ratio. And this is another one, don't do as I say, do as I do. I have to be the example. So if I stand up here and I talk to you for 10 minutes, that means I've got to give you 40 minutes to go out and work together and do your own thing to be energetic. Right? It's not just for kids, it goes all the way through our lives. So that's why more of what we're doing now is present some information, let you talk, let you present, let you discuss, and then I come back, introduce. I'm hoping that that's at about a 25% ratio. I'm probably a little over, I apologize. But I really try to hammer on that 1-to-4 teaching to coaching to athletes moving ratio. So I teach for a minute, you get 4 minutes to drill it. I teach for 2 minutes, you get 8 minutes to drill it. I talk for 30 minutes, practice is probably over, right? And we get into that. I even caught myself this morning feeling like I was putting too many of my own examples in, and that was taking time from you guys doing it. Because this isn't about me clinic, this is about you clinic. And our practices aren't about me practices, they're about the athletes, right? If we're athlete-centered coaches, then what are we doing that makes the practice centered on the athlete? And if we don't have a practice plan, we're not centered on the athletes. And if we don't have the ability to adapt and communicate well, we're not centered on the athletes. And we don't have to be perfect, we just have to be improving that process, right? There's no rush. So 1-to-4 teaching ratio. 1 minute I talk, I've got to give 4 minutes to the athletes, all right? We want to make sure that we try to keep that ratio the best we can. Video your practice. You're going to see me knock you 3 or 4 times if it's going. A lot of people go about 50-50, and some don't even get close to that. So it's just something to consider, and then when we get in the groups, we'll talk a little.
So I went through, and I got 2 certifications from USA Soccer. In USA Soccer, to be a national team coach, you have about 13, 14 different certifications you actually have to get to be at that level. So the first 2 start talking about just youth soccer and things like that. And their thing is a coach should never talk for more than 2 minutes to introduce a single move. So when I was doing it, I had to actually present the practice plan to a national level person that was evaluating us. And he looked at mine and he was like, you talk for 3 minutes, you are over. He goes, you explain one thing in your practice, that's it. He goes, if you try to, I originally gave him like 3 things I want to work on. He goes, too many. He goes, your practice is about 1, pick 1, and then you talk about it for 2 minutes. They get the time to go practice it. Then you go from there to reinforce it, but you're not allowed after that. They say go to a individual where it's just 1. They're doing it. Then it's a small-sided game where you take a game and you make them do it in a small game with about 3 or 4 people.
Sure.
Then you go to a larger-sided game. Then there is an actual use it in the field, and you're not allowed to talk to them while they're actually doing it because it's designed to let them experiment and play with it in practice.
That's
so
awesome.
When they're doing their stuff, you correct it in the small-sided game, correct it in the large-sided game. But once they actually get on the field and you let them go, you're not supposed to say anything anymore, and you just let them experiment, and hopefully you got the point across in the small-sided game and things like that.
Because isn't that what practice is for? To take what we see on these testing opportunities and go back in? How many of you would go to school and keep going to school every day if every day they tested you and then only for a few minutes each day they taught you? You'd be like, all I do is go to take these tests and I don't know anything. Is it any different than competition? Right? 1-to-4 teaching ratio, and it's nice because then there's an alternate 4-to-1. And the 4-to-1, one of the top sports psychologists we get a chance to work with at the USOC, I used to think 2 plus 2, and it's in our bronze course, 2 plus 2 positive coaching. If I see things you're doing wrong, I don't come up and tell you what you're doing wrong. I come up and I say 2 things that I noticed that you're doing right. What have I done to the athlete by telling them things that they're doing right? Confidence. What else?
Reclaim them and what they could be better at after an age.
You bet. Now they're buying into me, right? They're like, Coach likes my head position. And he said I was moving really fast. That's awesome. But then comes the next phase. How do we communicate the criticism after we've added the praise? I thought 2 plus 2 is a good number, and she said, not today. She's like, 2 plus 2 is great. She's like, it has to be 4 to 1 now. If you don't give 4 pieces of praise to every 1 piece of criticism, most of your kids are going to check out. Crazy. You know, back in the day, somebody could say, hey, bonehead, do it right. And you would just like, okay, because you had, right? It was like he was talking respect. The respect isn't as much there, but we still have to be able to communicate in this environment where maybe that respect isn't there. So we have to build them up. We have to give them that encouragement. So if we're going to do praise to criticism, 4 praises to 1 critique, and 1 to 4, about 1 minute of talking. You can do about 4 minutes of asking. And again, these are just guides, right? This doesn't have to be an exact science. If you say 2 or 3 positives and 1 constructive, right? I like the thing with the hand. Not 1 finger on your hand is the same, but it's still your hand, and that's your team. So what I do to this has to be a little different to that. Maybe you need 4 praises. Maybe somebody needs 6 praises and no criticism just to get them to come back tomorrow. And if our goal is to never be a kid's last coach, wouldn't you be willing to do that? Yeah, you know what? They're not getting that single leg down, but it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter for a lot of reasons. They're growing too fast, right? Those growth spurts, for every centimeter we grow, your nervous system completely rewires. You know, you're gangly and you're like the blow-up thing outside the gas station, right? And they can't control that. Gary was just talking about a kid that he was working with at a camp. He said the kid grew how tall? 10 inches in a year and a half? In a year and a half. Crazy. How can we expect an athlete who grows that size, who has no control of their central nervous system, to be competing? And these might be kids that were butt kickers until that growth spurt happens. Now you've got a kid that's never lost, losing all the time. What kind of motivation does that kid have to come back tomorrow? Almost none. So what do parents usually do? What do coaches usually do? Tough love, right? You got to get tougher. But they don't understand this growth spurt. I mean, do you remember when you were gangly? Can you imagine if somebody just yelled and criticized you all the time? What I'd like for my growth spurt. I'm going to go ahead and transition this into groups. And what I'd like to do is I'd like you in your group, and this is, I apologize to our videographer because this is going to be a little bit tougher to track, and I threw this on him last minute. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to practice a 1 to 4 teaching ratio. I want you to come up with anything. It doesn't have to be wrestling. It could be anything. Maybe it's a card trick. Maybe it's a mobility drill. Maybe anything you want. Maybe it's something that they have. But I want you to teach someone in your group something, and I want everyone else to be kind of the fly on the wall, evaluating it and watching it. So if we were doing it in our group, Omar, you're going to be the person who's teaching. Alex is going to be the student, and you're going to be doing the supervision to kind of see how they're doing it and making sure that they're kind of keeping on track. So you're teaching, you're teaching the flying squirrel, and okay, how do we teach the flying squirrel, and how do we do that in order to give this person enough time to practice it to where they can really get it in? Do you teach it all at once? Here's the 3 pieces to the flying squirrel. If you can do that in a minute and he can pick it up, then that's effective teaching. But if you have to break it down into 3 pieces, say, here's a 20-second clip of step 1, now go try it. Here's a 20-second clip of 2, now go try it for a minute and a half. Now maybe you'll end up being a partner in a group of 3, and it doesn't have to be physical, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just come up with something to teach and try to teach it with that 1 to 4 teaching ratio, and then we'll come back in and then we'll talk about it a little bit, okay? 1 to 4 ratio, let's say 2 minutes of planning, a minute of teaching, 4 minutes of practice. So what does that give us? 5, 6, about 7, 8 minutes, that standard time. Is that enough? Would you like a little bit more time on that? Yeah? You want to do 10 minutes?
Whatever. Doesn't matter.
Let's do 10 minutes on a 1-to-4 teaching ratio. This is the group that hasn't presented yet. So this will be our video group. So if you can make sure that we work with them to stay in a closer area. We don't need mats. You could probably do it right behind where you're at. Let's go ahead and take 10 minutes on the 1-to-4 teaching ratio, and then we'll come back in.
I think the one thing that's hard with the 1-to-4 teaching ratio is when you have a practice plan with athletes with different levels.
Related, or just mean something that you can teach at the table?
I can teach you how to correct your thumbs. That's probably pretty quick.
That works.
Yeah. So you're gonna put your hands together. You're gonna take your right thumb, your left thumb, right at that joint,
Right.
and then you're gonna put your hand up. And you're gonna push forward. So you're gonna relax your thumb. You got it? You got it? Try the other thumb. You're not, that feels good. You're not dominant hands. You're not harder than your other hand.
We're up, aren't we?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
2 nights after that. 1 minute of teaching and 4 minutes of practice.
Didn't never
So
crack.
I'm going to teach you how to crack
You put your left hand down, your left thumb down. So flip your fingers. So just the fingers down first. And then you're going to take your thumb and you're going to put it in the joint of your thumb.
No, we're gonna do the other one.
That's fine. You're going to put it in the joint down here. And then you're going to push forward. And then you can just do the other hand too.
You guys could do that?
No, I couldn't crack mine.
No, I can't crack mine either.
Now you got to practice it for 4 minutes.
Ow.
It's like 30 seconds of teaching, so you get 2.5 minutes
See,
to
this
go.
is an under 50 exercise.
Yeah, like, well, just got good joints. But I think that's the idea that
I can
you
tell
teach
you.
something that has 4 or 5 steps in a minute.
You just stop.
You go.
Stay where you are.
Does anyone have
Eyes up
Yeah,
here.
now we have to present.
Show it again. Because you're not
Well, I'm not a good person.
No, because everyone
show it over here. Walk to the other mat.
Oh no, I'll do it. it won't crack.
will crack. That's
We
good. You
just
crack
want
your
to
neck.
keep them
But like, I can't do it after.
The more you bring them in and out, that's more opportunity for them.
The one thing I think that most folks have a hard time with is the live wrestling. Because I know that we have clubs that just do straight live all the time. and
Well, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, like, because we
How
do a
much
lot more
practice
of
do you
it.
guys actually do with
Over the
technique
week.
with the Harvey Twisters?
Probably a lot less.
It's mostly that. So
Because I feel like Illinois is a technique state. I feel
yeah, so we do most technique all the way through, and then at the end we'll do live to practice the technique that you learn throughout the day. And you're supposed to, and that's where a lot of it comes in. A lot of kids will go back to what they know instead of what they just learned that day. And then, hey, what happened to you? We just taught you this today. Why are you going back to, we understand you know that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So like when we do our normally first practice of the week, we do both groups together. Then the next 2 nights, we
my
practice
remember the air conditioner situation.
Yeah, what happened?
how
I-
they're behaving.
they-
Whether we keep it open or we close
Yeah,
it.
I
When we
kind
do
of
the
figured
order-
that.
You two go over there and
I
work
just,
those
she's,
four
my
kids.
wife, I mean, the leader of troops, but she
Right.
can't handle details very well, so I had to comment myself and tell her, hey, you messed up my electricity and could you fix my
Are they gonna go
electricity?
fix it?
Yeah, they're sending somebody. It's a win is the question, but
Whatever. I do like.
she didn't know how to get through the process to talk to
Probably only
somebody.
like
She probably got
6
too
in the room,
angry.
but I can
It's
trust
like,
her
Pete
to
doesn't
go
want it.
do
They're
it
probably like,
and do it well.
I didn't understand your request.
The
Please
rest of them will be able to
repeat.
Yeah, she's
go
not.
on with
That's not
them,
her
make them
strong
walk.
suit. So she doesn't have the patience for that. Is what it is, and I don't know.
Maturity's just not there.
Oh, okay.
You can't sit there and expect them for 40 seconds while you're going,
Right.
because that shows the inexperience.
They're done.
And he goes, and that shows that they are now distracted. When you're sitting there going, what are we going to do?
And mom and dad don't have any confidence in you now,
Yeah,
and
and
you're
it
losing
shows.
it.
And he was like, "This is where you have to have this well thought out and practiced." And it showed, like when we were doing drills and stuff like that. Where we were like,
That's
"Oh,
awesome.
okay, I didn't see it," but it was not only just doing it, but doing it in front of him, and right then and there, where we had to
Get that
submit
feedback.
the practice plan right there. And we were out on a soccer field, and it was hot as hell. And he was like, "How are you doing your water breaks? How are you taking in the safety factor? How are
That's
you doing
awesome.
all these other things?" And it really was an eye opener, and that was the second lowest, and it only gets harder as you go through. But there's like 12 levels, I think.
3, 2, that's awesome. Thanks. 2, 1, time. How'd this work? Where's our presentation group? Group 4, right? Go ahead and let's talk. How did this work in your group? What did you notice?
I can actually teach everybody if you want. So I'm going to teach you how to crack your thumbs. So put your hands like this. You want your right finger to be up top. You want your right thumb to be at the joint, that bottom joint. You're going to relax your hands. You're going to aim down, and you're going to push your thumb forward. Some of you might feel a crack. You want to make sure you get in that joint, and some of you won't, just depending on if you broke your thumbs or not. Anybody feel a crack? You can practice it and see if you get either hand. You're going to get one of your hands is going to work and one of your hands is not. So if you want to make sure you got that there, and then you have that there, and you can push forward. And you can practice it.
There was two things that I think we noticed. One, I was screwing it up because I misunderstood which joint we were using. It's the one closest to your wrist, not the up here. And the second one was, and I think Zach pointed out, he found it easier to do it on his dominant hand versus like Caitlin is left-handed.
So how does that change your teaching? You've just gotten a couple of pieces of feedback on the communication piece, because you clearly know what you're doing. You clearly have a good thing going forward, and maybe there was a little bit of
Skill level change. That's what we were talking about when we do technique. Sometimes we get practices where you have the skill level variation, where sometimes you have to explore certain areas of the move that might cause this ratio to be off a little bit more, like whether you're going over a setup, some of the kids don't know how to do the setup, or you're going over an advanced move.
So question, why does that make the teaching have to go away from the 1-to-4 ratio?
So it doesn't if you stop. If you keep with the 1-to-4 ratio, you break the move down a little bit further and you have them practice it.
That's what I'm going for. Absolutely. We were talking about that here. Same thing. He's like, he did the second to lowest soccer certification, and it was every detail, and they were like, nope, do it again. Nope, that's not right. It just back and forth because we have to be that professional. We can't expect the kids to understand it or the students to understand. That's great.
You have to notice when you have those kids that aren't picking it up or that they have questions, if you have to break that down, if you have to go back to that ratio. One thing that we talked about as well is that there's some clubs that think live is more important than technique, so they really don't have this ratio at all.
Gotcha. So I'm interested. If I said right now, I don't think your teaching method is very good. If you did it in a different way, I think it would have been better. What would you feel right now?
I would ask you how I could improve.
Is there any internal kind of going like, well, okay, well, you're going to call me out in front of everybody? Like, is there a little of that?
I don't normally teach people how to crack their thumbs.
Sure. So you'd be more open to criticism initially if it's something that you didn't do very often. Now I know more about my athlete, don't I? Because now if it's something you do know, I turn it to wrestling, right? Now I'm going to have you showing a single leg. And now I say, you didn't teach that single very well. There's some big problems you've got there. We need to fix them. Now how does that change how you accept that initial criticism where I come at you with a criticism first?
So if you're talking about the 4-to-1 praise?
Just how do you feel if I criticize you at something you got down?
What you're going to say afterwards. I'm more curious to what you're going to say, how I can improve my single leg than me doing my single leg wrong. Because I know that I have a good single leg and that I can take someone down with my single leg. I might not be able to teach you how to do my single leg the way that you teach, and I need to know how you see it in order for me to get better. And even if after you give me that feedback, if I feel that that's something that I'm not capable of doing, I don't always have to take that feedback. But I'd be open to that feedback.
Okay, that's awesome. Now if I come at you and I say, you know what, Kate? Your vocal inflection was tremendous, how you were teaching. I really like the knowledge base that you have of that thumb cracking thing, and that's something that people are going to use. It's going to make them feel better communication to their head. I really like the fact that your teaching ratio was right on point. You gave a few things and you let them get it, and I really saw them come up. One thing I might add, if it's okay, is how we use our body language in that teaching presentation. Maybe we could be a little bit more encouraging, maybe proximity is a little more, just be a little bit more aware of that teaching. I really like how you're doing this, and these kids are going to benefit from that. How do you take that criticism differently than my first criticism?
I feel less defensive, that I have to defend my teaching or that I have to think about what I did wrong versus now that you've given me the information, I can apply the information versus me just guessing what the information is.
Sure. Did it feel good when I was telling you all the good things you did? Fills up that bucket with the good things, right? If you just throw 7 bad things that I'm doing in my bucket and you don't know my bucket, it might have just flooded over and now I don't come back to practice tomorrow. That's a pretty real thing that we do as coaches to our athletes, isn't it? Yeah.
You ever hear something called manager tools?
No.
It's an organization, does management training, they do have podcasts and books, and they talk about, in business with one-on-ones and giving feedback, and they talk about that any kind of criticism is framed as giving feedback, and that you approach the person and say, hey, can I give you some feedback? And so it gets,
I like that.
For the report, it gives some ownership, so they're then kind of they're agreeing like, okay, I'm ready to hear,
Sure.
what you have to say.
I'm willing to accept this feedback because you've asked me if it's okay. I like that.
An interesting way for athletes to give.
They might not be ready for feedback.
They might, and maybe that's okay. Maybe you say, all right, well,
Sure.
I'll come back to it when
Sure.
you're more open to it.
And that's where our patience comes in. Because really the main tools that we've got, right? Patience, communication, right? And then there are sub-tools for each of those areas. We're going through a couple of communication tools, but communication is the thing that we're trying to hit. I like that. And this might be a good option. I know you've talked about that. I know, Eric, you shared some stuff with me yesterday. I looked at that PDS information, scanned it real quick. If there are great things that you think have helped you, put them on that GroupMe app. That way everybody in this group will have the option to be able to see the things that you've used, the tools that have helped you, and then somebody might pick it up. It might be just one person in the group, it might be something that I just pick up, but that's how we can really share that information and communicate some of these tools really well, because I won't remember the 15 different tools you guys, hey, have you ever done the PDS and you've done this? It gets overwhelming, right? It's the same way when we do that to the kids. We throw too many tools, too much at them at one point. Be patient. It's a process. I just don't want to be their last coach. I want them coming back tomorrow. How can I make that happen? And over time, we're going to grow that tree. We're going to keep evolving.
I mean, this is the first time I've seen the 4-to-1 praise versus criticism, and I really like it, especially for the younger levels, because you want to build that confidence and everything else like that. But what was subconsciously engraved in my brain and then reinforced through my classes in college was the sandwich method with the
Sure.
good criticism.
Some construction and then
use work on, and then end it with something positive, so that they're going back out there with
You
a
bet.
positive, but you still get that feedback in the middle. So you kind of warm them up, give them the news, cool them back down, and send them on their way.
Sure. How many of you have used the word but in these situations? There's a great book called Exactly What to Say. Gary got me this book, and it says you should never use the word but. But if you're going to use it, the time you use it is when you say something like, you probably don't need this information because I've watched you coach and you're awesome at what you do. But if you're interested, some of the things I've noticed that have helped me coach these kids are the 1-to-4 teaching to athletes moving ratio. It's something that's really been effective for me. Maybe it's worth giving it a shot. Now you're saying they've acknowledged and respected the fact that I have good information and that I'm a good coach. You're acknowledging all those positives. And then the but comes in because I'm like, you probably don't need this. It probably wouldn't even do you any good anyway because you've already got this stuff down. What am I doing? It's praise, right? It's praise, praise, praise. And then the but comes in to say, but if you're interested in one extra skill, this might be something that would be interesting to try. They can consider it, they can digest it, or they can ignore it, but at least it presents it in a certain way. There's a lot of these that are great tools and interesting. You're going to react different than you. All right, and then again, it's just knowing that athlete. So, any other thoughts from your group on how this went as she was teaching the 1-to-4 ratio? Did you feel like you were pretty much, hey, we were doing this quite a bit. We were active. We felt good. Was there ever any downtime when you're kind of like, I'm kind of bored now. I'm kind of ready for the 10 minutes to be over. How did you feel in those moments?
I felt like I just kept one. I couldn't pop either one of my thumbs, but I just wanted to hang in there and and just try it again until I could potentially get it to pop, which I still didn't. But that's what we do when we're learning. I think is whether someone initially or an athlete does or doesn't pick up, the flow or the continuity of the move all the way through step by step. You keep doing it. You keep working through it until I find out what I'm doing wrong, which I haven't yet. But hopefully I'll pop my hands.
How cool is it that now you've got a student that's coming to you saying, even though I wasn't getting down what you were teaching, I was engaged, I was trying, I was giving you the effort. And if those are your core values, the effort from an athlete, how you teach determines whether or not they stay engaged. So that's great that you're getting that feedback that, hey, yeah, I didn't get it, but I was trying. I was trying to get it going. And I'll get it eventually if I keep learning. What a great attitude for an athlete to have, right? And it all comes from great coaching. That's pretty cool. Anyone else in the group?
Well, I found that I got it pretty quick, and then after that, I was kind of just like, well, now what do I do?
Sure, because now we've got an elite athlete in the room that's up at this level, and maybe I've got a novice athlete that's at this level, but I've got to keep them both engaged. Ooh, that's different. How can we keep this athlete? Did you notice that he kind of checked out? How do we handle that?
So when in the room, when you're in the practice room, you can walk over to that athlete. I see that you have that. The next step is this. You can go ahead and finish your shot, but make sure that you do a turn afterwards. So you can always walk over them individually, go into the group. Well, he's going to show the move for the next part. This is the next thing that we're going to go over. Go ahead and show it, and then you're going to teach it.
Gotcha.
Would that have made you feel better to have something at the next level to be active with?
Yeah, and granted, there's not really a progression from cracking your thumb, but
Right. Sure. Well, and then that's the next thing, right? Maybe it wasn't thumb, maybe it was neck, and then the next one's thoracic, and the next one's knee, right? So she's the teacher, right? You're the athlete that's at that level, but she's got that knowledge of where the next progression is. So it's kind of neat that you're like, yeah, you know what? Like I found out that there are some progressions past this that I didn't know about. Even the elite athlete now gets challenged closer to that 75% challenge ratio. Because if you don't get challenged, at least at the 75% level, right, with only 25% of you're going to check out. We're going to lose them. This is cool, right? And again, regardless of how we're coaching, what we're teaching, anything like that, the methodology of this is pretty neat. Do you ask your athletes, hey, how did that work for you? What did that feel like in that environment? Did you feel like this was enough? Did you feel like it wasn't enough? If you ever heard of the Aspen Institute and their Project Play, they have 8 plays, and one of those plays is ask kids what they want. It's so simple, but we almost never do it. Why? Because we're the experts. We know what we want to teach them, but do we know what they want to learn from us? That's get tougher, right? And that means that I have to be able to not only ask the athletes what they want, I have to prepare a practice plan, maybe research some of that stuff. Oh yeah, and by the way, I'm a volunteer coach with a full-time job, a part-time job, 3 kids and a wife, and a mortgage, and a car payment. I got a lot of stress in my life. Oh. Do you think meditation might help you take that 10 minutes of invested time in yourself to be able to help calm all the multitasking situations in the world so that you could say, you know what? What I realized in that moment is I still go to the bathroom when I'm at work. And so for that 5 minutes that I'm in the bathroom, I'm writing up my practice plan. Do we find ways to solve the problem of not writing the practice plan, or do we continue to say, you know what? I know this stuff. I'm just going to wing it again today. And I've been the wing it coach. And some of us can wing it pretty well, but at the end of the day, we still probably don't do the justice if we don't have it, right, planned and ready to go. A goal on paper is usually not a goal, is it? Right? Once you write down, I had a kid that we had goal cards, a different card. And he wrote down his affirmation statements on it. So here are my goals, here are my affirmation statements. I said, put it where you see it every day, by where you brush your teeth. Puts it in his bathroom. His grandma is like 86, came for his graduation. And she comes into the bathroom. She comes out a few minutes later. She goes, I am confident. And he goes, what? She goes, I was reading your affirmation card. I'm so excited now. I'm so motivated. She's like, how cool is that? So, right? It works for everybody.
So real quick, with the U.S. soccer thing again, they said make sure you have your entire practice focused on one thing. And so like for them, the goal was you need to touch the ball. Each one of your kids needs to touch the ball roughly 5,000 times in a practice.
Wow.
And so they were like, you got to think about that from the whole thing. So like if the focus is, I want to teach a single leg, how much of that practice are they really focused on that single leg and
Sure.
keep it focused on that and only that? Whereas, a lot of times we just devolve into it's live. And then that's not necessarily, you got kids just circling and, hand fighting for 15 minutes.
Sure.
And you're like, you got 5 seconds to take a shot. And they don't want to take the shot because they're suffering with it. But, that was one of the things that they said. They were like, if your goal is to get them 5,000 touches on a ball in a practice, and whatever you're teaching, you're going to get them 5,000 touches, whether that's with their foot, their chest, their head, whatever. But you've got to focus the whole practice to get that number per kid.
Hey, Gary. What's the top scoring move in Greco-Roman right now at the Worlds? Just if there's one move that you're like, right now, the one move that across the world is probably the top scoring move for any point level, or 4 point.
Well, I mean, the one that changes matches is the arm spin.
Okay.
It changes more matches. Now, the one that's used more is the gut wrench.
Okay, so the gut wrench is used more.
Or if you can't defend it, you're going to be in trouble. If you can't get to it, then you won't make it.
What's a rough number of those arm spins, scores? Like, you pull the stats.
The last World Championships, what they call the bent arm rotation or bent body rotation, been the high score. I mean, there was 16 done effectively, 14, 16, depending on how you score it, done effectively last year's Worlds.
Why are statistics important? Yeah, the 5,000 touches. What's the score that's going the most? Because now Gary goes into a practice plan. Do you ever touch a practice plan where you don't show some kind of a bent throw or a counter to a bent throw?
My athletes laugh at me a lot. Yeah. They'll say something like, "I'll bet you that this is going to turn into an arm spin for it."
All right. What do you get from that? What do you take from what he just said? How can you take what he just said because of what he sat down and watched every statistic from the World Championships and figured out, what's everybody doing? Because if I walk into my practice showing a back arch, a belly to back, but that never happens, was I efficient with my practice time? Just because I'm a great belly to back coach doesn't mean that that's the right thing to teach the athletes in this moment. What are the right things to teach them in the moment? 12 and under, we've got our athlete development model to give you some strategies so that you can kind of narrow that down. But do you ever do some math and say, man, you know what? Everybody's getting crushed by this cross-wrist Pennsylvania tilt thing. I'll tell you, I spent a whole year of my life just trying to figure out how to get out of a cross tilt, how to teach getting out of a cross tilt, how to keep it from happening. Because the PA guys, they crush you on a cross-wrist tilt. You think you're going for wrist control, next thing you're on your back. I did exactly what coach taught me. So don't I have to go into practice with a plan that's going to help give my kids the best opportunity? If you got a room of 60 kids and you're a legger and you teach legs but only one kid can score with legs, am I doing the right thing as a coach? But I bet you see it, don't you? And I bet we've all done it. So it's interesting to think, if you know the statistics, if you know the sport, if you do your research, or if somebody else does it for you, because again, I'm not great at delegating, but I've learned over time, if I can delegate that to them, I can focus on a better thing. So delegate the research, maybe say to the kids on the team, I want you to watch this match, count how many times somebody scored points and what they scored on. And if you get 60 kids in your room and each of them watches a match, you've got 60 matches of data. The kids have only done one. And guess what? Now they're doing what? They're teaching instead of just listening. Their retention goes up. These tools it's an interesting world. Is there a question? Good. It's an interesting world. Good stuff? Worth going through? Okay. No wonder I hate reading. I've been right all my life. 20% of what we hear. 30% of videos and images. 50% of what's exhibited and demonstrated. 70% of what we say and write. How many of you guys journal? How many of you require your athletes in some way to journal? Right? We're missing 70% retention because we're not having our athletes right. Now, I'm not saying you got to make it happen, right? No right and wrongs and no judgments in this room, right? We are just learning and figuring things out, and at some point, some of these things work through. I was younger, and I don't know why, but I went to Walmart, bought a 5-subject notebook, and I said, this one's going to be my record, and I would keep track of my record, pins, wins, losses, majors, all that stuff, had record of it. Then I had a record of all my nutrition. Then I had a record of all my strength training workouts. And I had a technique section where I could write my notes. For some reason, I loved writing it down. And I got better and I got better and I got better. Not just incrementally, but exponentially better as I wrote this stuff down. That's why I wrote a training logbook. I had a kid that came in, he's like, Coach, I'm 6 over. How do I get down to weight? I'm like, well, what have you had to eat in the last 3 days? I don't know. How much water have you had to drink in the last couple days? I don't know. How much have you worked out to get the weight down? A couple times. Not much. How do you expect me to be an expert with no data? Gary can't go into practice without data because he'll be teaching the wrong doggone thing. We got one of our national team guys that's turning the sport on its head. U23s in Akron had an 87% increase in Greco-Roman participation because that guy travels 320 days a year around the country to RTCs, getting that age group pumped up because that's the next generation of Greco wrestlers. He's got a plan, and he's got data to back it, and he's got the coaching tools to be able to impact so that they remember. And now you've got 87% more kids, young ages, 23 and under, who are excited about Greco-Roman wrestling. Isn't that awesome? How cool is that? Bring that man into your community, right? They take the other 30, 40 days a year that he doesn't travel and make him travel more. Right? And then 90% of what we simulate, right? Doing it, designing it. How many of us, when we went out in our 1-to-4 teaching ratio, used EDIP? Did you educate the group on what you were going to teach them? Did you demonstrate?
We didn't use it, but we had a question because we did discuss it, and we kind of, our general consensus was if we go through all that, then we're not going to have enough time. I mean, I think maybe we don't understand it well enough, but it seems like it's going to take a long time to go through that whole process.
You bet.
So if you spend a long time, then you've got whatever the ratio was, 4 times as much the kids doing it, they'll be practicing it 2 weeks later, until we can talk again. So, because there's a lot in that.
Have you ever seen A River Runs Through It? Yeah. Great movie, right? The dad, who was the minister, he was the teacher for the kids. He sits behind the desk and the kid comes in with his paper, right? And he goes, lines through it, lines through it, lines through it. Half again. Half as much. Do it again. So the kid goes, oh, great. I just want to go fishing. He goes back, has to rewrite it. Half as more condensed, more specific. Take out the fluff. Brings it back. Half as long. Do it again. Kid comes back. He does that a few times. Half again. How many of you have an elevator pitch? You go into mom and dad's house, or you go up to a kid in the school in the hallway, you want to get them on your team. How many of you have a 30-second elevator pitch on why that kid should wrestle? Well, your elevator pitch might start off 10 minutes long. Your educational piece for what you're teaching might start off at 10 minutes as well. As you practice it and prepare yourself to walk in, understanding the 1-to-4 ratio, what you'll do is you'll hone it down, you'll refine it. You'll say, it used to take me 10 minutes to teach that. It's only 8 minutes now, and I know I only give them 4 or 5 minutes. But you know what? That's 2 minutes better that I've saved. And if I'm teaching 7 things at practice, that's 14, 15 minutes. I'm a 14 to 15 minute more efficient coach, right? And if you have 15 minutes more to the day, the kids can leave earlier. Maybe they can get more in. Maybe they can have more fun, right? So as we hone it down, it doesn't have to be 1 minute to 4 minutes right now, but it has to get closer to that number, and you have to kind of keep putting yourself, again, half as long, do it again. Half as long, do it again. Hone that process down. If I'm whittling a boat out of a giant log, I can't just, right? I might start off with an axe, but eventually I have to get to sandpaper. The different tools that you use to bring those down. It'll come, right? Today, that's great that you're talking about it and it's coming through. It'll come, right? Believe in that process and you're going to make that happen and you're going to figure it out. Yeah, there's 7 steps to this move. So I'm going to just explain the one really quick and give them time. Make sure that it's got, right? If we didn't educate, demonstrate, imitate, and practice, right? Let's work on that process. Again, we only have 10 minutes here instead of, more time that you'd have. And maybe today's practice is only one thing. And where does that reflect back on? Your practice objective. How many practice objectives did I have? I've had people say, I've got 7 things that I want to teach, and the first thing they teach had 16 steps, and they gave them all at once. And right, and we all do that. We've all done that, where we say, you got to do this, blah, 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 because we've got it in our head, and we just have to get it out of our bucket and into theirs. But then we yell at them because they don't have it really in their bucket. Right? These are the kind of things, just think about them, right? Think about them as you're teaching, as you're educating. It's not right or wrong, right? So this, I want you to see in your groups, we're only going to take about 5 or 6 minutes. I want you to see in your groups how you might be able to reflect on how you teach, because we're not coaches. Bobby Douglas, thank God. First week I'm at USA Wrestling, he goes, hey, Mike Clayton, it's Bobby Douglas. I'm like, wow. I'm like, Coach, I'm honored. How can I help you? He said, you're the new coach guy, right? Coach education guy? I was like, yes, sir, I am. He goes, you're not a coach anymore. I'm like, okay. He says, none of the people that you're talking to are coaches. I'm like, okay. I'm pretty sure it's the National Coaches Education Program and that there's 36,000 registered coaches, but it's Bobby Douglas. I'm going to give him a lot of latitude. He goes, you're a teacher. Remember that. You're not a coach, you're a teacher. Your job is to teach. That means you plan, you have objectives, you have lessons, you've got time. You need to make sure that these coaches know that they're teachers. Get this coaching thing out, because a lot of us have the bad perception of what coaches do. We're teachers. Think about the best teachers you've had, emulate them. How many of you have gone to school and you've learned all of these teaching methodologies for how to run a classroom? How many of us take it and go right into the wrestling room and implement the same thing? It's crazy, right? What changed about putting on a different pair of shoes and shorts and a t-shirt instead of my suit and tie and teaching chemistry versus teaching wrestling? Chemistry is just a medium, just like wrestling is. The teaching methodology doesn't have to be any different, right? Let's apply what we know into different situations. It's that slow multitasking. I invested all this time in this education. Where else can I apply that to be more efficient and more effective in what I do? Crazy. 5 minutes with your groups. Talk about how you can be more effective and help your athletes cement their learning better with a few changes in how you teach.
Tired or
What do you think? What was the I in did?
imitate?
How do you imitate? What do you do to imitate? That's the part understand. Educate, demonstrate, practice, or imitate. They're imitating.
We do sometimes. We have some of our better kids. Sometimes I'm a big fan like them. Sometimes they feel like one thing I just over and over. Sometimes they might teach it in a different way. Sometimes they might I can relate that now. I know what so again, after a while, they kind of wrestle. It's like second nature. Some of these kids might address it. I don't get not that right. It's still common sense. They might be a guy who does that. I feel like sometimes with that, then keep teaching it. Once you teach it, once you think about it, it's good.
Watch some of those curriculum videos. They're like minute and a half. Short and snappy clips. You guys find the double generation. This might be video oriented and shorter stuff like that.
And two, I mean,
I know that.
there's so many ways for them to find the same thing. When you show something, they go find somebody else showing it that night. You know, so it's
I know what you there. I have a ratio but I have two page for guys, and like you go on.
I got this like 10 times stuff on YouTube. Like what's
We'll take that.
I like tell the guys.
You can go and it has like high cross. It's like high cross finishes. You go on clips.
The other thing I got from my
I have instructional DVDs.
one thing that I was taught is like never compromise principles. What kind of screen do you have?
Well, our kids go home and access this too. So then when they go home, like you say, listen, if there's something like the kids come in and they ask for matches. There's like college matches, freestyle Greco matches, that would be more important. And I have over 1,000 clips on there broken down. I have like pretty detailed. What's the name of it? Freehold Court PC. It's also our kids. Our kids love it. There's open mats. People are all in it. Because it's actually not to the test.
You said in your practice room?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, you can actually access
How
it
do
now.
you do it?
It's connected to the DVD or laptop. There's a laptop with the AV cord.
When you're in a practice room, what do you do with the
Show videos in the practice room. Like
Sometimes we show some stuff. Sometimes we like
How do you do that with the kids?
Yeah, we just have the kids sit and talk about it, and sometimes there's some stuff in there, like, I think a video we were watching that works really well. Eric Guerrero, we watched one of these DVDs. That's what we were able to make work done because we're like, show us the kids, we throw a bunch at them right now, but they got to hear a little different, somebody else, we also were able to kind of get some stuff done, we get some paperwork done. So we're like, going over this, let them watch this, maybe pick up something else. Maybe some of this stuff's going to reinforce stuff, maybe some kids are going to get some better stuff. And that's it. We did with Young Hook series, it was awesome. It was Chris Pelham Young Hook series. And it actually was at Wyoming. And he was learning at the high single, he attacked the high single, it's not there, and then there was the 15 part. For the half hour they were watching that, and this reinforced, we think it was, maybe I'm wrong. It reinforced what we were showing, and then built upon that too. So you might be like, this is awesome. I know how to now hit the high single and re-attack the high single the first time. Whereas the kid was advanced, so now you're on the flip side, off the underhook side, I don't want to flip underhook offside. Now I built on it. So that was the thing we liked. Yeah, but they're hearing something else. Now they're saying, oh my God, this guy's a two-time out in the beginning. Chris Pelham, two-time national champion, three-time U.S. World Team member. I know this guy knows a thing or two about this. Let me zone in. So I think that's...
Sometimes the same thing said by a different voice.
It is, and sometimes it's when it's not us. They're like, oh my God. So sometimes the kids, some guys say, one of our 140 pounders is a state 145 pounders state qualifier this year, and we let them show a hammer. A couple moves off the hammer series. Tony showed it to them. They were just, and the guys like picked it up, and the guys like picked up good. It was a different voice. Sometimes they need a different voice, especially in high school. I think in club you had the more motivated kids in club. In high school, sometimes the kids didn't kick it. And again, you don't have to hammer them, but maybe it's a different voice. It's all you need. And then it's like a little different.
I don't know. For us, we try technique for that. Like you guys were talking about, you want a kid that has 20 moves, then he does average one move and he does excellent. So we try to limit because what we see a lot of kids, oh, I want to know how to do this, I want to do that, oh, I want to be able to do this. But they don't really understand why they're supposed to do it. So what we do, we like to say, okay, I don't want you just to be able to arbitrarily do a move because I say do a move. I want you to really understand and know why you're doing what you're doing. So, like if somebody shoots a high crotch, or if you're shooting a high crotch, if somebody shoots a high crotch at you, and you go down and you block the inside of it, why are you really doing it? Do you know why? So I like kids to
explain what they're doing.
Yes. Tell me why you're supposed to. I want them to tell me why. Why are you blocking that? Why do you come down and block that elbow? Because if he can't tell me why, that tells me he doesn't really understand position and wrestling, what's going on at that particular time. I want him to be able to break it down. Well, I have to block his elbow so he can't come across and shoot the devil.
I feel like a lot of coaches don't say, if you block the elbow when I shoot the high cross, not why. You can't come across. I agree.
Right, so I like what he said, because as a coach, yeah, you're a coach, but you're really more of a teacher, and I want you to understand why you're doing what you're doing, not just arbitrarily. So if I can get that kid to tell me, if he shows me he understands, hey, coach, you know, I got to block his elbow so he can't really cross and run the double one. I've done what I set out to do now. I know he understands position and wrestling.
Pressure, snap down, get up on it. Pressure, teach. Once you that's that's my big head. And I don't
analyzing, creating and analyzing right in there, big time learning. You're analyzing why. That's why.
So every practice, your warm up, it's about that, and you get hand fight. Here's your 5 hand fights.
I like that. Tell me why you're
They
why that works.
can't tell me why they're doing it. and there's a problem.
Just robots.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Every practice. I don't want to be well, because you told me why. Don't just, I'm not really sure.
Well, I got guys using technique. You do our activity training. What are you going to do this all? I'm going to learn how to throw legs. First year guy, you don't need to learn how to throw legs. Learn how to ride a frisbee first. Everybody thinks they know how to throw legs. And we're like, we don't show legs. I got to a point where like, I really like you're saying good at this. Our head coach, everything at the wall, so on stick. I'm showing legs. Half our kids aren't year round wrestling. So you come in as a freshman, we didn't have a feeder program last year for a while. We got a trick, a couple of kids that knew how to wrestle. That was it. And they were great. Like, if you come in as a freshman, you wrestle. We show your legs. We teach you legs. You practice it 2 minutes a day. How much do you really practice? He made this mistake at that time. Now you don't wrestle all summer. Now we teach you as a sophomore. By the time you see that, maybe you're okay, but are you really effective? And by the time you try doing that as a sophomore, maybe you take it on to pull it in, get reversed by somebody who knows what they're doing. Because you're not. Everybody learns. And you're putting yourself in more position to throw your legs in than you are just riding basic riding your wrist on the side or on your wrist hard. And I mean, that was my system. Take that out. Cut that out.
6,
You're going to learn how to counter under
4,
There's no
3,
9 ways to affect it. Part-time wrestler.
2, 1. Time. All right. Let's see. Are we back to you guys? All right. Let's go with group 3. All right, coaches, thanks very much for your attention. Group 3 is going to give their presentation really quick.
So the one thing Coach had went over that he really likes to get his athletes do is kind of after showing something or going over positions, why they're doing it, like so that they're not just doing it because you said so that they're actually there's a deeper level of understanding, which we kind of felt fell in the bottom towards the analyze and create down there, which gives them a higher ability to retain it. So they're not just maybe blocking an arm when they're coming across on a high crotch. They're kind of telling you why they're doing it, which seems to work well for the kids. And then if they're not able to explain it, then you're kind of understanding, well, they're just doing what I'm telling them. They're not understanding the bigger point to the position.
That's awesome. How many of you ask your athletes to explain this in words before you allow them to attempt it physically? Great coaching tool. If you're not doing it, that doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's a great tool, right? We get a chance to see truly what they know before they go physically do it. Think of a job that's a little bit more life and death than wrestling. Soldiers are good ones, right? Right? Your life's on the line. So you say, what we're going to do is we're going to have you enter a house, right? And this is a hostile house in a hostile environment, and you're going to have to enter, right? If we don't talk through that process, and the first time we practice it, we just put a shoulder into a door and start shooting people, how do you think that's going to turn out? The odds are pretty rough, right? So usually the military will say, okay, walking into this situation, what do you think you may see? What do you think you may encounter? And then the troops will say, okay, well, we're going to breach the door. The breach person is going to, get to the side. Then our attack team comes in, and then they start to go through the processes and the steps. Now that's a life or death situation, but they have to do it that way because they know that if they don't talk it through first before they get into that situation, people are going to die. The wrong people are going to die, right? In our perception, right? Because on the other side, they're thinking they're fighting for the same reasons that we're fighting for, probably. But it's interesting to think in that situation when you put it to an extreme. Now, I've had a parent say, you're telling me I can't do this, but I was in the military, and this is, I'm like, wow, okay. So you're comparing wrestling to being in combat in Iraq. I said, that's probably your first problem, because this isn't the military. And he goes, have you ever even been in the military? And I said, yeah, 7 years active, graduated from the Naval Academy. He goes, oh. Right? It's not just some idiot talking out of his side that doesn't know what I'm talking about. He's like, this guy that's done some stuff, right? We're not in the military, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't learn military tactics, because you still got to move a lot of people from point A to point B, and you got to figure out how to make that work. Military's great at that. Best in the world. We still got to do that at times, but then we also have to understand the softer skills of some of these things. So it's great. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead. What else came out of this?
And then we're just kind of the difficulty, and actually can be helpful too, is just the amount of video that's out there now. So there's so much things for your kids to access, and so much that they want to learn. Being able to kind of condense that down, or even you're showing something and then they go see a video of somebody else showing it just a little bit differently, which can be helpful, but it also can be difficult too.
Well, John Smith shows it this way on TV, on YouTube. It's not the way you showed it, and he's better than you, so why aren't we doing it this way, right? Sure. What's interesting, you said to have them go out and check out some video, right? So maybe they're watching some of these videos. That's a heck of a lot better than just reading or hearing it. So this is a good step. What could you merge with the athlete saying, hey, I'm going to send you guys home. I want everybody to pick one match and watch a video tonight and do what else that could take that 30% and add it up? What do you think? What could you mesh it with up here? Sorry?
They could demonstrate something for someone.
Sure. Hey, I want you to watch a video, pick something, and come in and demonstrate it tomorrow. That's a great idea. Because now all of a sudden, what are they doing? They're learning to not just see it, they're learning to retain it because they know now they have to teach it. It's going to help cement it in better. What are the other ones? Where's the right one? I really need to remember. There you go. Saying right, yeah. Right? Hey, I want you to go home, watch a YouTube video, and then I want you to write a few paragraphs on what you saw. How many of your athletes learn better from reading and writing than they do from watching videos? How many of your athletes go from watching videos to needing to just hear you say it? Have you ever had an athlete that 10 times in a row, they're like, Coach, could you say that again? And then you say it again, and they're like, one more time, could you say that again? And you're like, hey, moron, because now our bucket emotionally is full because we're not understanding that learning mechanism of the other athlete. This is where this comes in. Good segue. Go ahead.
One of the things that I do, I don't really get the chance to do it with all the athletes in the room because, quite frankly, it's too hard to teach it to every single person in the room. But the guys who I see or who come to me and are more motivated to learn and become better or interested in tutoring or whatever, as soon as I get done with their goals, I go right into having them, I give them homework. And it is to draw a flow diagram of their attacks and their defenses from every position.
That's really cool.
It not only helps them to eliminate that thought process, because we've all wrestled before, but if you have enough time to sit there and think about something in a wrestling match, guess what? It's too late. You need to know how to react, and creating that I know what I'm going to do here, here, and here, that eliminates that synapse.
There you go, right? So now, what comes, chicken or the egg, right? What comes first, the motivation or the work? If you make them do the work, a lot of athletes will follow and get motivated. But if they're not motivated and then they don't do the work, are they at higher risk to go out the door? Probably so. My job's here to recruit and retain. I'm not here to make world champs and Olympic gold medalists. That's Gary's job. That's our national team staff. That's not even in my wheelhouse. How do we make those things work? If it's important enough for one wrestler, it's probably important enough forever. Put it in your practice plan. It's good stuff. This is where kind of the rubber meets the road. I think this might be one of the most important concepts of the communication piece. Not just the VART questionnaire, but this is going to be where we kind of go. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to ask you in your groups to describe. You've gone. And here's the situation. My wife's windshield wiper the rubber was literally like 3/4 of the way ripped off the windshield wiper. Couldn't do any of the job that it was supposed to do. She had to drive to Denver. It's an hour on a really rough interstate, and it was raining. And I was like, I got to make sure she's safe. I run to the store. I grab the package of the windshield wiper. Now I'm getting ready to put that windshield wiper together. How do you do it? Now, you've never done this before. You really don't know what to do. Do you just try to do it? Do you watch a YouTube video? Do you call your mom or dad and ask them how they did it? Or do you need to pull out the directions and read and maybe put some notes down? I want you to talk into your group and describe the process of buying that thing, and then how would you, if you've never done it before, the first time we're seeing it, how would you go in and change that windshield wiper? Okay? I'm only going to give you 3 minutes, so I just want one person in the group to explain that process, and then we'll come back in. 3 minutes starts in 3, 2, 1.
And I go in, and I get great expert, blah, 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 whatever. It doesn't matter what
Discussion on this one?
advanced guy.
Not with a specific group. I'm going to give them 3 minutes to count, and I'm just going to bring the boldness into this next
So I decided to watch him do the first one and do this. You squeeze it, you turn it, you pull it out, you put the other one in, you just flop it back over. But when you're looking at it, you're like, but apparently it's more common now. Who's first?
I just like, and then because I don't trust myself, I would watch a video. I would like Google a video of it, and then I'd go back and read the directions, and then I'd try it. And then I'd probably have to like stop and look at it a couple times during the process. Or constantly.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely probably look at the box first if it looked complicated. If I knew someone who was like good at that, I could call them. Like my dad does construction, so if something's wrong with my house, I'm like, hey Dad, how do I fix this? Or I'd go on YouTube for something like that, just because it's so convenient. And Google has like, you can YouTube anything. Absolutely. You put the model of the car in.
Oh yeah, it's that specific even.
It's crazy.
That's funny.
The stores that install for you.
So,
Done.
Yeah. You're gonna speak this time.
All right. That's fine.
So you got 3 minutes. You're 2. You got a couple. Cool. And how do you pronounce your name? Bior.
Great. Who would like to share how they put a windshield wiper on a car? Because this is very relevant to wrestling. Go ahead. Anyone? Yeah, go ahead, Sid.
I'll go for it. I love telling this story. My wife, the Commander Penix of the U.S. Navy, that commands troops, several of them. She drives in, she comes in the middle of the rain, and I see that she's completely missing a wiper blade, so much so that she's letting the thing go back and forth till there's a complete imprint in the glass. And so I'm just like, why? Anyway, so I do the typical American way. Not every car is the same on how you put it on, but you go there, go through the book, get the right blade, and all right, I can figure this out without reading any instructions. And sometimes it works out for you, and sometimes it doesn't. Because later you find out it's slipping off or something.
So you're kinesthetic first. You're going to try it and manipulate. Okay, good. How'd that work?
That time it worked out because in previous times, different vehicles that I found, and I didn't do it correctly. So I looked up the instructions, and maybe if I didn't understand the instructions, then I'll go to a YouTube.
Gotcha. So you're kinesthetic, and then you're read-write, and then you're visual, video.
Correct.
Cool. Just learning how you put a windshield wiper on a car can tell me how you learn. Now, as a coach, isn't it my job to know how each of the 5 fingers on that hand learn? So if we're aware of how we learn, we can put ourselves in a better environment for learning. You're at this clinic and you're a visual person, you probably sit in the front row. I need to see that screen, right? Maybe you're an auditory person, you want to sit close to the speaker. Maybe you're a read-write and you're like, you know what, I'm going to sit in the back because I like to take a lot of notes and I'm going to have to read a little bit and I don't want to be the one that everybody's looking at in the front because I need a different style. So it's interesting, right? Now we know how we learn. This is a quick VARC test questionnaire on 4 styles of learning. If you have a device, I'd like you to go ahead and go through, and it will calculate and tell you your opportunities. If you just do a Google search for VARC questionnaire, this should pop right up. Eventually we'll have this on GroupMe, so we'll be able to say, here's the link on GroupMe, click that, and we'll run the class out of that app, but we're still in the developmental process for that. So I'll give you a few minutes. Once everybody's done, maybe just kind of give us a heads up and say, hey, I'm good. And once I see the majority of the group's done, we'll move on for the sake of time as well. Thanks. 3, 2, 1, time. Thank you. All right. I know some of you may not have gotten all the way through it. The most important thing is the concept of understanding the learning ages. So how, Sydney, did your VARC match up with your windshield wiper training?
So I just hit I wanted to see the end. It just came out. Anyway, it was different. It was different because of the different scenarios. So trying to find a place. I envision, if someone were to ask me, tell me, hey, I want to go, the shop thing question to ask. in my mind, I think about where a place is visually, and like city Chicago, I know most of the city. It's a huge city. So I envision in my mind where that place is in my mind versus looking at a map or something of nature. But coming here, like I took the train down to a certain point and then I hooked it the rest of the way. I looked at a map. So it depends on it. So a lot of things are different. It all depends on what exactly it is.
What did the survey give you a response and said, here are your learning styles?
You know when I hit it and I was just getting ready to read it right when you asked me the question.
Yeah, just throw it out loud if you don't mind.
Your part. All right. Oh, was at the top? Am I skipping it?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Oh, there you go. Your scores were visual 5, oral 3, reading write 6, and kinesthetic 8.
So kinesthetic, read write, which is exactly what you said on the windshield wiper thing. You said, I'm going to try it first. I'm just going to figure it out, right? I'm a physical person. I just need to figure it out. That's kinesthetic learning. Then it went to read write.
Yeah, that was 6.
Read write was your next score. So that means I pull out the directions, I read the directions, and I go through. When I did the windshield wiper on my wife's car, I was saying, kinesthetic first. Come on, I can figure this out. I'm a smart guy. No, I'm not, evidently, because this is not working. I went right in the house, I watched a YouTube video. Visual, right? Because my next one is I'm a visual learner. I go back out, tried it kinesthetically again, didn't work again. I went right back to visual. 6 times I went from kinesthetic to visual. That's how committed I am to learning in that way. When your athlete asks you to repeat it 10 times, they're probably an oral learner. They have to hear it. So now you maybe demonstrate it and you show it 10 times visually, but if they're an oral auditory learner, they didn't pick up much of anything that you showed because they don't learn by seeing, they learn by hearing. So your athlete comes up and they say, Coach, could you give me that again? And you say it again. And they say, one more time, could you give it to me again? Because they need the repetitions orally, not visually, not kinesthetically. Cale Sanderson might watch it once and he'd just go do it, and it would happen. His dad would get so frustrated. He's like, Cale's in the corner goofing off and distracting the other wrestlers. I'm like, all right, big guy, if you think you're so smart, why don't you come here and show the move? He'd only seen it once and he would do it perfectly right away, and his dad would get so frustrated. He's like, fine, just whatever. Special talent, when you're kinesthetically able to do those things and pick them up right away without seeing it, hearing it, I got that, that's easy. Right? He's an elite kinesthetic learner, and I bet if he took the course, his kinesthetic numbers would be way off the chart. How you coach each of those individuals in your room is going to depend on how they learn, not just how you teach. I'm going to let that one sink in for a little while.
How do you learn that? I mean, you ask your student athletes to go through this process.
I think so. And again, now you've got different ages. So now maybe you've got a 6-year-old, they're not going to go online, take a test, understand it. That'd be a little bit tougher. But if you said, hey, I want you to build something out of Legos. And if you're going to build something out of Legos, would you rather just dig into the pile of Legos and figure it out? Or would you want somebody to tell you how to do it and you could listen to them? Maybe you call your dad and your dad says, hey, this is how I do my Legos. Or maybe it's, right? So now you start to understand a little bit more of our athlete. Go ahead.
How do you then apply that? I mean, because you've got a room full of kids. You've got half that maybe are auditory learners, half that are visual.
Yeah.
How do you solve for that?
I don't know, but it's been done. Everything has already been accomplished, right? It's a problem that I see right now. A lot of different learning styles in my room. Somebody's figured it out, right? In your environment, it may be a little bit different. What I would recommend is, one, if I'm just doing the move visually, right? I'm just showing that move visually and talking, it's audible. But what would I need to do to make it more kinesthetic? Hey, you know what? We're going to imitate what we're doing now. Use your bodies to try to do it. So EDIP kind of covers a lot of these because I educate you so you've heard it. Then I demonstrate it so you've seen it. And then I let you try it so now it's kinesthetic. Now the only one that we really left out here was read-write. Have you ever thought about saying, today's practice plan with the objectives stated, here are the things we're going to do, give the athletes the practice plan ahead of time so that they could read through the practice, and then as you're showing, hearing, and letting them sample it, they've already read through it and they have a better idea of understanding of how to use those other 3 learning styles. I think this might be one of the coolest things that we can do to prepare ourselves to create that environment for the most kids the longest time.
not to leave that unaddressed, but in special education with kids on the autism spectrum, you have to differentiate. And I know the time factor is important in a practice, 1 to 4, and maintaining a valuable time that you have. But if you can, with that practice plan that you have, if when you hand out stuff, maybe have particular graphics or pictures for maybe a small portion of your team that otherwise moves best that way. And you can provide that, but differentiating by trying to find out again and then just supplying what they need and how they groove when they learn.
How many of you guys see Win Magazine? You see the USA Wrestling Technique page in Win Magazine. That for the last 5 years, it's been my pleasure to have an opportunity to work with our national team staff and athletes to make those happen. There's read right, because now you see the reading for the descriptions underneath. There's visual, because you see the photo. I can't really do kinesthetic in a magazine, at least I haven't figured it out, and if you have ways, let me know. And I can't do oral. But then what we'll do is we'll try to create a video of it, and then the video link through Win's online program would allow you to say, if I really like this move, now I can go online, I can click on that link, now I can see and hear it, and then I can try it kinesthetically on my own. So that way we try to cover at least 3 of the learning styles, and then we expect that kinesthetic piece, you're going to have to do that on their own, because I just haven't figured out how to make it. It's not scratch and sniff. It's going to be a little scratch and sniff wrestling stuff would not be a good idea. Of all the things we do. It's interesting. Think about this one too, and this is just a complete sidebar. How big of a part is smell in your memory? So if you walk into a wrestling room and it smells like god-awful mess, don't you think your kids are going to relate that? Somehow that's going to... And so now if I'm like, should I stay or should I go? Man, I can't stand the stink of that room. I got to get out of there. Having a clean room is a lot more than just sanitation, skin issues, things like that. We've even talked just very superficially about national teams coming to the Olympic Training Center to practice. If anxiety is an issue, could you put lavender spray in the room? Yeah.
Okay. You said I was in.
Hold on 1 second. We're going to turn. You want to? Here. I'm going to mic you up on my. Just take my mic.
Sense of smell is so important. Sense of smell is so important, right? What Mike's just saying, strong sense. So just a couple weeks ago, I'm on the road, and I'm in Indianapolis, and walk in this wrestling room. It is the best smelling wrestling room I've ever been in my life. Okay, literally, it smells like bouquet flowers, right? And I'll kind of give it one of these, and the next morning, I walk in. It's a big field house in Indianapolis. The wrestling room is around the corner, so like you got to go 2/3 the way around the arena to get over to the wrestling room. As soon as you walk in the door, smell it. It's the wrestling room. I'm like, okay, wait a second. This is crazy because never been there, right? Now I walk around, and as we walk in, I start like sniffing again, and the guy turns and says, "Best smelling wrestling room in America," right? And I'm like, "Oh, best smelling in the world." and he says, "That's because 6 months ago we hosted President Trump, and this is where they staged it." So one of his assistant people came in, they looked at it, Secret Service came in, looked at it, had people like in the louvers and the vents. I mean, it's crazy what they did. And she just walked in and said, "This room smells. This will not do." And then they said, "But this is the bunker. This is the most," because it was like a lot of wrestling rooms, like in a basement, right? Concrete everywhere. And that's what it was. But they came in and installed these air fresheners, and they just left them. And it's the greatest smelling wrestling room in America.
Isn't it interesting how he remembers that? Will you ever forget that wrestling room?
Oh,
No. Right? Now, you might not also forget the wrestling room that you walked into when you're in Kazakhstan, and it was a little bit of a different vibe coming out of that, right? Our sense of smell makes a big difference. They've got the lavender spray here in the hotel, and you can put that lavender essence on your pillow because it's relaxing. If your team's a little too anxious, a little lavender spray, right? Let's incorporate all the senses. We're trying to teach to all the learning styles. How do we incorporate all of those learning styles and all of those senses? Again, is this getting a little overwhelming? All the different things that we're talking about and thinking about? I'm overwhelmed and I do this for a living and I get paid to do it for a living. You guys are mostly volunteers trying to do this and trying to figure it all out. Is it too much to think about? Good. Because you don't have to fix it all at once. And you don't have to change all at once. And you don't have to be perfect ever. It's an impossible goal. It's okay to strive for it, but make sure that we just understand, hey, what's 1 or 2 things that I get out of this clinic that I'm going to implement right away? Before you leave here on Friday, I would love for you to come up and say, you know what, I know it's only Thursday, but I've already got 2 things that I really want to implement. Or talk to one of your teammates and say, here's 2 or 3 things that I want to implement. And that's even better because you've been working with your teams. So you guys can pick it out. Pick it out and make sure you tell somebody what you're going to change, what you're going to implement, how it's going to change your program, your life, the life of your athletes. Right? If we can do more and more of this and just be, again, it's more about awareness than anything. I'm just aware that there are different learning styles out there and I might have to be just a little different in how I coach from now on. Right? Am I coaching to the athletes in the direction they're at, or am I facing away? Because now the visual learners can't see anything, and they're lost. Right? Did we have them imitate it so that I could make sure everybody was doing it right? Right? If I was going to do an imitation, could you run everybody through the thing, through the thumb thing? Yep. So educate us, demonstrate it, then have everybody imitate it, and then we won't go to the practice phase. But just do the 3 parts of EDIP. First, educate.
So today we're going to crack our thumbs. So we're going to put our hands together.
Why?
So that way we have a good grip and we can actually get the joint properly.
And I'm sorry, why are we cracking our thumb? You told us what we're going to do, Simon Sinek, but you didn't tell us why we're doing it. You already lost me.
Oh. So sometimes your hands get tight. And when we wrestle, we have hand position, we grab people's hands a lot. We want to make sure that our joints are ready to go. So when we hand fight, we're able to do it. And our thumbs are the most important part. That's what's
awesome. Now we know your why. I feel bought in now. Do you guys feel different? It's one thing to say crack a thumb. What the hell are we doing this for? Okay, good. Now you've told us the why, you're educating. Sorry, good.
So we're going to put our hands together, make sure our thumb is in the right position, and then we're going to aim down so that our thumb is relaxed, and we're going to push forward to get that joint to release.
Now everybody imitate the move. And I want you to look and I want you to see if everybody's doing it right.
So you're going to want to put your hands down together.
Question, has she got it now? Have you got it? Have you got it down now? Is she doing it right?
Still has to get the joint in,
Good.
but she has to work on it a little bit
Good.
before we can.
Who else is struggling right now?
He is struggling.
Good. I want you to teach him now. Because you just made sure that she imitated it right and he's struggling. And do we retain more showing, learning? We retain more teaching?
You have it. You seem like you've done this before.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. What are we doing? Now we're starting to practice all of these tools and putting them together to create that environment. And you're great. Thanks for, you tolerate me very well. I'm trying to put you in a very difficult spot to try to figure these different things out. And it's, yeah, now it's hot too, right? We're going to put the air conditioner 5 degrees the other way. So now as we go through the process, we start to realize, wow, you know what, so I educated, right? I knew my why. I came up with my objective, why we're going to do it. I educated everybody. I demonstrated it. And now that everybody's imitating it, now I'm overwhelmed. I got 25 coaches in this room. We've only got a few minutes left of the morning session. How am I going to get around to everybody in this room? Once I get somebody that's doing it right, hey, go help your partner. Hey, you've got it down. Help your partner. I'm going to go work on this other group because I know I got 50% of the group doing it right. Now you teach it, and it's going to help cement that learning because we remember more of what we teach, right? You did a great demonstration. I saw it. I heard it. I got to try it kinesthetically. What am I missing right now? I've got 3 of the 4. What's the one we always miss? Read, write. What could you do right now? Because you've told your why, you know your education, you know your demonstration, your imitation was great. Now we're getting ready to go practice, but we left out read, write. What can you do to include that?
After you can move down, go right down and move down.
Awesome. That's a hell of a lesson. Every learning style has been met. Everyone in the room has had the opportunity to do it. People are teaching each other. What happens when everybody starts to work together in the room for your team? Whole different culture, right? Yeah.
I do a lot of this in my practices. I will nobody in my room is allowed to pick their partner. I put them with people, the higher level people with a lower level person. Because number one, it's going to help the higher level person is always like, why are you putting me with him? That's not going to help me. Yes, it is. It's going to help you be able to teach it. And it's going to help the other person be able to learn it, because when I first started coaching at Reading, it was me and one other coach with 40-some kids in the room. Now I'm up to 9 coaches, and a lot of those athletes that are in there can help their partner. And I feel like they learn a lot better by it. And they also screw off a lot less because they're not with their best friend.
Sure. And now that right, we were back. I'm so from you. Zach. I will keep one. So in your situation, right? You were the one who's like, I had it down right away, and you were the one who's like, I'm trying it. It's just not quite working yet. You're not challenged enough. You're challenged enough. You're like, I'm good. This is good, right? But you're not challenged enough. But now if you've got to teach it to him, right? Because maybe the progression, you're still teaching the next set of the progression. But now the problem is you've taught the first level of progression. He's learned the second level of progression while everybody else is learning the first. Now you teach the second level of progression. Well, he's already done that too. Is he going to be 2 steps ahead of everybody the next time? 3 steps? How do you keep challenging him in order to make sure that he's challenged in a learning environment where everybody has to go at the same time? You teach him. You're doing it great. You're so good at it. He's getting it, but it's going to take. Show him what you're doing and see if you can help him out. So now what are we doing? We're being more effective. We're taking because you asked the question, everybody's on all these different spectrums. How do we get it to? Incorporate everybody. Use their strengths, because I know, man, he is a great teacher. How do we get him to be more active? Teach people. Bring them in. Does this tie in a little bit together? Good, because boy, I put a lot of time into figuring this out, and I didn't know if it was going to work. And so now an athlete profile card. Because we've got to know our athletes, right? So now we understand how they learn. We can cater our teaching towards that. If we're in an environment where somebody's teaching us and they don't cater to our learning needs, what can we do? I see somebody and they stand up in front and they just give an oral video presentation for 2 hours. How do I turn that, because I'm a read-write, how do I turn that 2-hour presentation into something that helps me learn? Because the instructor's not changing, right? The instructor's just, I'm going to stand here, I'm going to talk, you're going to see the screen, you're getting that for 2 hours. But I'm a read-write.
Handouts.
I'm not changing. I'm stubborn. You're the participant, and I'm not changing. I'm not giving you a damn handout, because I know how to teach. I stand here, I lecture, you look. How do you change your learning to fit my lack of ability to teach the right way? How do you do that? Take notes. Do you allow notebooks with your kids in the wrestling room? If you know that you've got 6 kids or even 1 kid who's a read-write, you should encourage them, hey, I want you to bring your notebook into practice. And now you've got kids writing. We did it at our last developmental camp out at the training center. I said, hey, anybody here who wants to bring their phone on the mat, bring your phone and take notes. Write it down in a book. Anything that you need to do. If that helps you learn, I want you to bring it out, keep it close, and make it happen. I bet we had 6 kids out of 50 that were in there writing in their books. But you know, statistically, that's about the number that are read-write. And then most of them are kinesthetic. Yeah, just show me what to do. I'll figure it out. Okay, that's cool. A lot of, hey, can I see that again? Sure you can. Why do you want to see it again? You're visual. Hey, coach, could you talk me through that again? Sure. Why? Because I'm an auditory learner. These are the kind of things that we can create that better environment by using these tools. And then this, for the communication side, is our last piece to the puzzle. I want to see how much time we've got. No time. Last piece of the puzzle. I'm going to let you kind of digest this over lunch because I want to get you out and back. Athlete profile card. You should know the name, the date of birth, family information, single family, divorced family, 2 sets of parents. It's going to change the way that kid's pressure and his bucket is filled up. So you better know, hey, you seem a little stressed. How are things with both sets of your parents? Everything going okay? Now the athlete's like, yeah, and my dad was a little rough on me the other day, and then I went to my mom's house, and then my dad and my mom kind of got into it, and I'm struggling a little bit. Hey man, you know what? That's tough. Like, you want to talk about it? Is there something we can do? Now we do it in an open environment, but a private environment. There are other adults in the room, so I'm open, right? I'm not doing it in closed space where I could be grooming or showing an athlete grooming tactics, but I still need to be able to get to them. Other athletes on the team they connect with. Why is that important?
Knowing the friend circle.
There you go.
Knowing if they're hanging out with kids who make good decisions, knowing if they're where they're going, who they're with.
Are they hanging with the Jewel crowd, right? Right? Are they hanging out with the crowd that goes out and parties a little harder than that? Right? You might be like, boy, I'm glad my kid's only hanging out with the kids at Jewel because he's not doing it. He can stand up for himself, and it's a lot better than that other group that's going out and smoking weed and drinking beer behind the school every Friday night.
Play devil's advocate. Sometimes you want a kid like that hanging out with those other kids because you're trying to save or you're trying to help every kid. So if you're my good egg, and I believe that you can probably be the upstander or get your teammates to be real back in, like, hey, how about instead of going to the party, you guys want to just kick in my basement? That's the kid that I want hanging out with knuckleheads. I don't want the young, immature, or kid who's easily swayed with my knuckleheads. But like my upstander or like my shining light, you're hanging out with Johnny and Joey, and I know Johnny and Joey are up to like some mischief. I feel better that you're hanging out with them than flipping the coin.
Getting the prize for the day. Why? Because you said, hey, you threw me a tool. I think there's a different way I can use this tool. I think maybe I can interject the good kid in with the bad kids, and he'll bring them up to speed. He'll keep them out of trouble. He'll give them a different focus. Awesome. That's it. No right or wrong. You might try it, and you know what? That kid might end up smoking weed and dropping off your program. And then you'd be like, whoa, that didn't work, right? But we're thinking, right? We're thinking, how do we use this tool? How can we make it work? That's exactly what this is about. Same for the previous athletes they remind me of. Maybe you can invite an alumni back. Maybe you already say, hey, I've got a problem with this current athlete, but I remember I treat her just like I used to treat that other gal. That other gal, when I did this worked. All the battles have already been won. So let's see what we used on somebody else and bring it back and lay that fix into this environment and see if that works. So I know the ones they remind me of. Responds best when what? When I'm caring and compassionate? When I'm a little stern and aggressive? Because now we know how to coach each of these individuals. And then responds the worst when I do what? Because remember, we can't change them unless we understand how to affect them in the positive way. Right? Interpersonal, intrapersonal. How do I relate those back and forth? I don't have time to discuss it. I want to get you out to lunch so that we can get back for our next session. Next session time, 1? Great. Is everybody pretty much just staying at the hotel for lunch, or are you guys kind of zipping off? Gotcha. Okay, you're good to go. Thank you very much. We'll see you back here at 1 o'clock with Rob Prebish's talk on anxiety. Thank you.